All right, back with the WMAY morning news feed. I'm Greg Bishop, 8:22. After I leave here, I'm going to be heading right to the Illinois State Capitol, where lawmakers are heading back for special session. What exactly are they dealing with, and what else could they take up? State Senator Steve McClure joining us in studio to give us a bit of a preview. Senator, thanks for taking time. How are you?
Hey, Greg, good.
So, maps, of course, on the docket for the special session. But yesterday, we also had a 970-page bill in Senate Bill, or is it House Bill 3666? Yeah. Interesting set of numbers there, but we could see energy legislation surface as well. What's the latest intel you can give us?
So on the energy bill, if there's something to be voted on that's going to actually have a chance to pass both chambers and be signed by the governor, we expect several amendments, so maybe 5 or 6 amendments. And I would say that I think the Senate president wanted to move forward with the legislation last night at the last minute just to kind of reopen negotiations, and we'll see where that takes us. But, you mentioned the amount of pages in that bill.
Right.
Who can analyze that in time? I mean, truly analyze it in time for a hearing, which was last night, particularly when we also had, after that hearing, hearings on the maps. A hearing on the map. So, it's all happening at the same time. It's done by design. The more you do, the more you can get away with, because you can hide things, because it's just too tough to analyze everything in such a quick turnaround.
So the various aspects of the energy legislation that were laid out there yesterday, Senator Hastings took about 10 minutes and did bullet point. It's going to do this. It's going to create job training programs for green energy. He was pretty emphatic that this is a very wide sweeping approach to the state's energy policy. And then you had Senator Cunningham say, listen, this isn't going to be the final conversation. He said it seems like every 5 years, lawmakers come back together with an omnibus energy bill of sorts that might drastically change things. Is that the best way to do it, or should this be an ongoing conversation year in, year out?
Well, that's not the best way to do it, but you do have to have adjustments based on changing circumstances. But while Senator Cunningham says that this adjustment's going to be every 5 years or whatever, it's going to be every 24 hours at this moment. I mean, it could be every 2 hours. We could see drafts of brand new bills, every hour. And I mean, we expect 5 or 6 amendments for this potentially. So we only have 24 hours in a day. Just the whole process is just so messed up and so bad for government and so bad for our state.
So we're looking at the possible closure of coal-fired power plants by 2035 or 2045, maybe a little bit later if they can prove carbon sequestration. Right. You've got the propping up of nuclear power plants. I didn't hear a figure last night. Do we know how much ratepayer subsidies are going to be offered up there?
No, we don't have that number at the moment.
I know it previously had been like $750 million over 5 years or something, but that, of course, is to try to stave off these nuke closures. Is that a real threat in your eyes, or is that just kind of saber rattling of sorts?
I think it's a real threat, but one of the main issues with this, as you know, is there are so many different aspects. You touched on just a few.
Just a few.
I mean, we didn't even talk about the eminent domain aspects of it, where the government can take property for public use. I mean, this is like scary stuff, and some of this.
But to take it for public use, but to give it to a private energy distributor,
Absolutely.
Right? Like that's the problem that some farmers in Southern Illinois are having right now.
Absolutely. It's touching on so many different topics, and again, we may see 5 or 6 amendments today. So, what's the rush at this exact moment? We could be here for the week if we wanted to do things at least somewhat rationally, but no, of course not. That's just too good for us. We need to get in and get out. I mean, this stuff is this is why people don't have faith or trust in our government, and it's very disappointing.
Do you foresee possibly being in tomorrow to deal with some of these? Because when lawmakers had to come back to revise the budget, senators kind of stuck around a little bit longer. Ultimately, all the energy stuff fell apart. But do you foresee that it's possible you guys may be called back into session tomorrow or later on this week as well?
Certainly possible. I mean, when you've got these talks that are ongoing and groups trying to negotiate and everybody getting involved on a very complex issue, then, of course, we could certainly be here tomorrow or later in the week. There's no question about it.
Senator Steve McClure with us on the WMAY morning news feed. We've also got the maps. We have, of course, been talking about this for months since the Democrat majority passed maps in May based on estimates. The governor enacted those in June. Even he recognized that they would have to come back and revise those maps. But Republicans, you guys have not produced maps, right? The party's essentially saying it's beyond time for the legislature to have any involvement in this.
Well, I think it's fair to say that there's no real serious discussion or negotiating. I mean, one of the questions that was asked last night in the committee hearing was, well, how many maps have you received from the general public? And, who's reviewing these maps? And they don't even know who's looking at these maps. They couldn't tell us how many. And from what I've heard from reports from people is that they're having issues even signing up to be able to submit these maps. So it's apparently a website that's not really functional for the purpose of submitting a map. We know they're not looking at these maps. It's just all a big show. So how are we supposed to react to that? Not only that, Greg, but the timeline between when we got the census data and the time they're asking us to produce the maps is so short, it's very difficult to do that. And again, there's actually, like the energy bill, there's no deadline. We don't have to do this today. You could take a week, you could take 2 weeks, because they've already missed the one deadline, which is in our Constitution, which was in June. And so now they're going to pass another map, just like we had to come back to pass another budget because they screwed up in the language on the budget stuff. But passing another map after the deadline, well, does that mean we can now come back in a year? The Constitution says every 10 years you've got this deadline to pass the map or it goes to bipartisan commission. We have missed that deadline if the map is not valid, which I don't believe the map is valid. I think the court has basically said that. So to come back now, well, can you come back in 6 more months to pass another map and then a year? I mean, this stuff is just is silliness. It's silliness, and it's just total superficial nonsense. Everybody knows it, and we're just going through the motions in these committees for a sham show that doesn't serve anybody but the self-interest of these Democratic politicians.
I looked at the Democrats' website for their maps, and I couldn't quickly find when the hearings were. I got an email as a member of the media talking about, hey, there's a hearing coming up. Even this morning, I think there's a House hearing on legislative maps, but it's not posted at ilga.gov. What are you hearing from the civics groups out there that do get wind of these hearings? Are they given short notice, and how does that impact this process?
It hurts the process. They're given very short notice. The last hearings that we had before the previous maps were passed, we had witnesses, one of which was crying. They were so upset by what was happening. So it's just a sham process, and there's no other way to describe it. And I don't even know why the Democrats are going through the motions, because everybody knows what's happening right now.
State Senator Steve McClure, of course, today is special session day. They're going to be taking up the maps, but we could also see some action on the sweeping energy legislation. Back to that just here briefly. What's your prognostication? Do you hear from some of your constituents in this area? I know Senator Turner was standing with you in a bipartisan stance several months ago when this came up. Have you heard about whether or not some of those that were opposed or on the fence are now joining on with the ranks and going to see this passed? What do you think?
Well, it's fair to say that a lot of people are waiting to see what the final bill is. And, when you've got this potential or 5 or 6 amendments today in negotiations, it's fair to say that everybody is just sort of sitting around kind of waiting to see what happens. I shouldn't say sitting around, because they're actively involved in the process, trying to persuade people to do certain things and to do what's right. So, but I think everyone is waiting to see what the final product is, and we still don't know what that product looks like.
State Senator Steve McClure on the WMAY morning news feed. Greatly appreciate you taking the time, and we'll see you down at the Capitol here in moments. All right.
Sounds good, Greg.
All right. It is the WMAY morning news feed. Now 8:31. Let's take a break for news. Kevin Hart standing by in the newsroom.
The president to speak today about the withdrawal from the WMAY newsroom. I'm Kevin Hart.